I recently crossed off a bucket list cruise that I've wanted to take for years. It would be a cruise to Alaska on board Royal Caribbean's Ovation of the Seas, a 7-night sailing out of Seattle, Washington, visiting ports like Juneau, Skagway, Sitka, and Victoria City over in British Columbia. And the best part about this cruise was I'd be taking my mom on her first cruise ever. Now, I do have to admit, my mom was extremely spoiled for this cruise. Not only was she going on vacation with her favorite son out of all 5 of her children, but my sponsor Touring Plans also hooked us up with a junior suite for this cruise, which I'm extremely thankful for. Look, obviously that last part was a joke. I don't even know if I'm the favorite. I'm pretty sure my older brother Chris and my twin brother John have me beat. But anyway, we took a cruise over to Alaska. So for today's video, after my amazing voyage, I want to give all of you 8 things that you need to know before you cruise to the final frontier, aka Alaska. For number 1, a cruise to Alaska is expensive. So we'll get right to it. The cost of a cruise to the final frontier versus the cost of a cruise to the Caribbean is going to be vastly different as far as price. In most cases, I've seen oftentimes you can get a 7-day cruise to the Caribbean visiting ports like Nassau, Cozumel, and Perfect Day at Coco Cay for as low as $100. And that's before, of course, port taxes and fees. Now, when it came to the price tag of my 7-day sailing on board Ovation of the Seas in my junior suite, the price came to just shy of $6,200. Now, as somebody that has been in multiple rooms and I have friends that have been in junior suites, the price tag can range greatly from anywhere as low as $5,000 up to $12,000 for a junior suite. Depends on how new the ship is, how high demand is, what peak season it's in, and all that other jazz. But anyway, it was hooked up by my partners over at Touring Plans. Link in the description box below if you want to check them out. But one thing that will cost you a lot when it comes to your Alaska cruise, and I want to say this is primarily the financial killer of this cruise and the reason why it is so expensive, and that's the excursions. Instead of jet skiing and Mayan ruin excursions like you would see over in the Caribbean, over in Alaska they have helicopter adventures, whale watching, dog sledding, train adventures, and well, they are not cheap by any means. I did the dog sledding experience with my mom over in Skagway. It cost me $438. And I did the whale watching over in Juneau, Alaska, which cost me about $300. Now, some people might say, well, that's a pretty affordable price range. But I do believe for most people, when you are doing 3 to 4 excursions, it can add up very quickly, no matter who you are or how much money you have. However, I do have to say that I was extremely satisfied. All of them were worth it. Some I booked with Royal Caribbean directly. Some I booked with Viator. Link in the description box below if you want to check them out. But overall, I was extremely satisfied and I would gladly do it again. And for those out there that say they just would take the cruise and they wouldn't book any excursions, I gotta say the excursions is one minor or major detail that can, in my opinion, make or break the cruise. You would even get to the point to where you could potentially call the cruise itself boring. Speaking of which, number 2, a cruise to Alaska is not boring. So whenever I talk to people about potentially booking a cruise to Alaska, I was often met with people telling me that I would get bored very quick and that I was too young to go to Alaska. I wouldn't enjoy myself because I'm a partier and this is the life that I live when I'm on board cruise ships. Well, for starters, I want to say that overall I didn't know what to expect. It was my 2nd time going over to Alaska, well technically 3rd. I used to work for the Harlem Globetrotters. I had been there on multiple occasions and well, it was just my first time going on a cruise. So I knew what the overall outlook and outline of the adventure would be like. However, when I got on board Ovation of the Seas isn't an extremely old ship. It's with the newer class of ships, meaning they still have the same activities that they have on other newer Royal Caribbean ships. The silent disco, the surfing simulator, the indoor skydiving. And overall, the nightlife, surprisingly, which I thought was going to be a little bit dimmed down, was pretty lively on board that ship. Also, I must add to this by saying that nowhere else in the world, except for maybe some parts of Europe like Norway, can you look in the middle of the ocean at any point in time and see whales, dolphins, and sea lions. You might be lucky to see some dolphins over in the Caribbean. However, next to a cruise ship, it can be extremely rare. Number 3, you don't go to Alaska for the ship that you be sailing on. Now, this may sound kind of strange and odd for some of you out there. For a lot of you out there, this may be something you already have knowledge of. whenever you go on a cruise to Alaska, it doesn't matter if you're sailing with Royal Caribbean, Celebrity, Carnival, Princess, or even Disney. You go for the overall experience because, yes, some ships out there may be more aesthetically pleasing than others. However, keep in mind that you are going to Alaska and there's literally nothing like it. And to be honest, whenever you go over to Alaska, chances are you probably will not spend a lot of time on the ship anyway. I'll explain later in the video. Number 4, the weather in Alaska is extremely unpredictable. So I know naturally you may think that if you go to Alaska, you're just going to deal with cold and snow. Well, you got to understand that Alaska is a lot more diverse than that. Sometimes you may deal with rain, sometimes you may deal with a little bit of sun and then rain, sometimes you may deal with wind and rain, sometimes you got to deal with muddy rain, sometimes you deal with a little bit of a cloudy and then some sun and then some more clouds and then rain. You get my point here. You have to be prepared because sometimes you may need a thin jacket and sometimes you may need to layer up. Number 5, a cruise to Alaska is for old people. Now, this is something I guarantee a lot of you have heard about a cruise to Alaska. It's something that I've heard, and well, I gotta be honest with you, it is partially true, but not really. It's similar to number 2, that people say that cruising is boring and it's for old people. There were people on board that, well, let's be honest, they were a little seasoned, a lot of salt and pepper hair running around. However, I did see a large variety of different age groups on board Ovation of the Seas on my sailing over to Alaska. Why? Because everybody was typically sailing with friends and family, just like you would see on really any other cruise ship. I would think the only time that you would often see a younger crowd, somebody that is my age, which I'm 29 by the way, or maybe a little bit younger, would be on a 3 or 4 night sailing on any particular cruise line, often going someplace like the Caribbean. They even had the same activities that they would have on any other Royal Caribbean ships like Love and Marriage. The only thing that they didn't have, which I was really upset about, and I understand because it wasn't for the demographic, but more so for the weather, is the Sexiest Man competition. I usually win that, and well, this is the first Royal Caribbean cruise that I wasn't able to make sure I maintained my title. Very disappointing. Number 6, you're in port all day whenever you cruise to Alaska. It doesn't matter if you're in Ketchikan, Juneau, Sitka, you name it. Oftentimes, typically, whenever you go on a cruise, you are in port from morning time all the way until the evening time when you go to Alaska. This can give you the opportunity to go to not 1, not 2, but sometimes 3 excursions. Well, usually I see people, they may do 2 in one day, or they'll reorganize it in such a way where they do 1 excursion and go have some Alaskan king crab, and then after that they'll go for a hike. But my point is, you have all the time in the world to go enjoy whatever port that you're visiting over in Alaska. And I would say that's a lot of a nicer deal than whenever you're in a Cozumel. Sometimes you'll be there for as short as 5 hours and you gotta skedaddle on out of there. It's a nice deal when you go to Alaska, and my point is that you are not rushed at all. Number 7, the embarkation process is extremely disorganized, and we might as well go ahead and loop in the disembarkation process as well. I had to put one bad one in here because, as I always say here on my channel, there are pros and cons to everything, even if it is the perfect vacation of a lifetime. So I don't know what it is. Originally I thought it was just my particular cruise, but after talking to some friends of mine that not only work on Ovation of the Seas and other ships that are currently sailing out of Seattle and Canada going over to Alaska, for some reason that process over there has been extremely disorganized, and there's been a lot of confusion. They don't know what to do with the lines. I was disappointed because I had a suite, well, a junior suite for the first time, and I thought I was going to be able to skip the line and have everybody watch me and my mom as we go ahead and gallop over first in line, and it didn't work out. They didn't have any of that set up. Now, like I said, I don't know exactly the reasoning as to why, but it just was all over the place. Maybe it's because they started a little bit late with the Alaska cruising season last year due to the pandemic, and post-pandemic, they're still trying to get their sea legs. I don't know, but I gotta say that when it comes to that particular situation over in Alaska, you really gotta get it together, because that was by far the worst embarkation and disembarkation process that I had ever seen on board a cruise ship. Well, off the cruise ship. You get what I mean, getting on and getting off. Now, before we get to our 8th and final point that I want to bring up as far as what you need to know about Alaska cruising, I do want to say that I appreciate all of you guys, for those of you that have made it this far. And if you would do me a huge favor and let YouTube know this video is kind of good since you have made it this far, by hitting that like button, subscribing if you haven't already, and of course feel free to share this video to everyone all over the world so that they could take a trip to the final frontier and be prepared for it. For number 8, a cruise to Alaska is addictive. Now, I'm going to speak just from the heart on this one. No lines, no script, no talking points, because I believe this is the best way to get it across to all of you. For most of you that say you would never cruise to Alaska, there are your friends, or maybe you at one point in time that said you would never cruise, and then you try it and now you're obsessed. Even more so, you're obsessed with that first line that you said with, be it Royal Caribbean, Carnival, you name it, you're loyal to Royal, you're part of the fun people. It doesn't matter. But my point is, when it comes to a cruise to Alaska, it is unlike any other. I have always wanted to go to Alaska, even when I was a kid. I finally got the chance when I was working for the Harlem Globetrotters. But I gotta admit that going on a cruise gives a completely different perspective. I'm not saying it's better or worse. I always advocate for cruise being just kind of like a taste test of traveling. But thankfully, when you are going on a cruise to Alaska and you visit these ports, you're there pretty much all day, which is a nice step up for just being there from the typical 5 to 8 hours on a regular port of call. But man, from the whale watching to also just the calm experience, being in the middle of the ocean, seeing the mountains and the glaciers, and seeing just whales just pop up out of nowhere on your sailing. And I gotta also admit, seeing my mom extremely happy on her first cruise ever, now being hooked, man, there is nothing like it. My advice to all of you, because honestly, I'm probably going to try to go every year. I know my whole situation is a little bit different. This is what I do for a living, and it took a lot of work to get here. But if you haven't already, go take a cruise to Alaska. I extremely encourage it. You will not be disappointed. And as they say, well, if you don't want to go, don't knock it until you try it. Now, if any of you want to see the real-time videos or vlogs from my Alaska cruise, I have created a playlist or a separate folder here on this channel. Just go to the actual channel and there is a segment called Playlist. You can find Ovation of the Seas. It'll all be there. That way you can see exactly how I felt in those moments on my cruise to Alaska. On my way out of here, I also want to give a huge shout out to my sponsor, Touring Plans, because they gave myself and my mom the vacation of a lifetime. And if you guys want to check them out, I just want you to know they are very caring people, and for them, money is not one of their main and core priorities. Yes, they run a business, but man, do they hook it up and try to find the best possible deals for all of you, give you the best experience and the best vacation possible. The link to Touring Plans will be in the description box below, and I'll also pin it in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit that like button on your way out, of course. Just know that I love and appreciate every single one of you. Until next time, I'll see you later. Take it easy.